Hello and welcome to Chapter 2 of CS 1400 Fundamentals of Programming. So in this chapter we will start talking about building blocks of Java applications. So let's start by discussing the expected outcome. So what do we expect after completing this chapter or this module? After completing this module, you should be able to distinguish between the different data types in Java, know and declare variables, create constants, and use arithmetic operators. We will also know Java expressions and learn more about output. And we will be able to get the user's input and use it in our program. Now, data types. We have primitive data types, which are simple data types that the programmer can use. And now Java has 8 primitive data types, starting with the byte, which has the size of 1 byte. And this ranges from 128 or minus 128 to 127. This is followed by short, which is basically 2 bytes, and this is the range of the short, and so on. So we don't have to worry about the ranges. We only need to worry about the data types and know which one is larger than which. Now it's byte followed by short, so this is from smaller to larger, followed by int, followed by long. Now all of these are ways to store integers, which is basically non-decimal numbers. Then this is followed by float and double, and these are going to save decimal numbers. And then we have char, which is character, so it's going to save a single character, followed by the last data type, which is a boolean, and this will accept either true or false, and we will see examples on either of those and how we can utilize them. Now, couple notes. Float must be followed by the letter F, and or must be started by having float in parentheses. Characters must be enclosed between single quotes, otherwise you will get a compile time error. Now I always talk about what we call the container rule, and the container rule is as follows. So imagine that you have a container. Now for the container, if this is for example my container, if I have an item that is smaller than the container, it can fit in the container. If I have an item that is larger than the container, then it cannot fit in my container. So let's say that I have a container of a type integer. So I can fit integers because they can fit in that container. Bytes can fit as well. But now let's think about a double. So a double will be something like this. Now, since the container is big enough, I can fit that integer inside that double container. But if I have a double, I cannot take the double and fit it inside the integer container because it is a different size. Now we have to also think about the shape of the container. Now, for example, we are having the containers for numbers as those rectangles. So let's suppose that the character is some sort of a triangle. Now, for this triangle, it has to fit in a triangle container. I cannot fit it into this container because it's gonna be something like this. And similarly, if I have, let's think of booleans, for example. If booleans are represented by circles, then this circle cannot fit properly in this container, but it's gonna need a circle container. So remember the container rules. Container rule always when you are working with data types. a small item can fit in a large container, but not the opposite. So a small item like an integer can fit in a large container like a double container, but not the opposite. Now let's talk about the variables. What is a Java variable? So a Java variable is nothing but a container to store data values. It's called a variable because its value is allowed to vary over time. Now each container has a size and a content type, or as we can say, a size and a shape. And again, the container rule, a small item can fit in a large container, but not the opposite. Now how do I declare a variable in Java? So it is going to be basically this rule. So we'll have the variable type followed by the variable name, and then we'll have an equal sign, and then we'll have value. Now the type can be integer, can be double, can be any one of those data types, and we will see later on that we can use different things in here from different classes, like for example a string. String is not a data type, but it's a class, and we can use this as the type of the variable. Now let me go back to this. Now the variable name is what we call the reference of the variable, and this is how we can refer to the variable in our code. So for example, if I look at this example here, integer my int is equal to 1. So if I want to retrieve this value, I use this reference right here. And this is an example of a string. String my string is equal to hello. And as you can see, we have double quotes in here because strings are enclosed in double quotes. Alright, so let's see some more things about variables. Now we have something that's called declaring, and then another thing that's called initializing. So what is the difference between declaring and initializing? Now declaring a variable is just creating the variable. So if I declare a variable, I am just creating the container, which is now just an empty box without any variable in it. So if I declare this as x is equal to this container, now this is my x. I didn't assign any value to it, so I'm just declaring this container or creating the variable. Now you can declare it with a value inside, but usually declaring refers to creating the variable, creating the container. Now you can create a container and put a value in there, and this is going to be declaring and initializing in the same time. Now you cannot declare another variable with the same name in the same scope. So we will learn later on about the scopes, but for right now, for your application, if we declare a value that's called x or a variable that's called x, we cannot create another x. The type doesn't matter here. So if I create this as an integer, since it's on top, then it's fine. And then if I come back here and try to create this as a double, although this is an integer and this is a double, since they have the same name, Java will not allow it. Now keep in mind, Java program execution will start from top to bottom. So if you create a variable in this line, for example, it's going to be visible from that line and down. Now if I create a variable here and then try to create another variable with the same name somewhere in here, Java is gonna complain and it's not gonna allow me to do so. And if I try to use the variable somewhere in the lines up here, Java will not allow me because I did not create it yet. So keep in mind that you have to create your variables first, and then along the code you can use it. Before you create your variable or declare your variable, you cannot use it because this thing doesn't exist. Now initializing a variable is assigning a value. Now you can not do this without declaration. So declaration can be in the same line or in a different line. So for example, if I want to assign the value, let's say 9 to x here in this box, okay, so I cannot come and do this 9 and try to assign it to this box without declaring it, so without having x here before. So I have to create the box and then place the value in it. I cannot just place it here and try to put it in there. So I cannot just say, okay, x is equal to 9 semicolon. Now what is x? I have to create it, so I have to create the container for x. I can say, okay, integer x, and then down here in my line somewhere I can just put this line and it's going to work just fine. I can also ignore this part and go directly and say integer x is equal to 9 and assign it, and this is going to create the box and fill it with some variable in there. Now let's look again at declaring versus initializing. The order is important. So first you have to declare and then you can initialize. So you cannot initialize without declaring. So again, first you have to declare, then you have to initialize. Now you can declare and initialize in the same line. So this whole thing is going to be declaring and initializing. Now this part without the one here, so this circle should end right here with a semicolon. This is declaring if we're talking about declaring alone. So this is the declaring part, even if you don't have the semicolon. Now this is the initializing part, and the whole thing actually right now is initializing because we're declaring and initializing. Now this is declaring and this is initializing, so this is doing it in different lines.